supper for us. The bishop took his place in an antique velvet chair. The Señora and I were placed on each side of him. The room was very well lighted, and there was as great a profusion of custards, jellies, and ices as if we had been supping at the most profane café. The nuns did not sit down, but walked about pressing us to eat, the bishop now and then giving them cakes, with permission to eat them, which they received laughing. They have the most humble and caressing manners, and really appear to be the most amiable and excellent women in the world. They seem to make no ostentation of virtue, but to be seriously impressed with the conviction that they have chosen the true road to salvation, nor are there in them any visible symptoms of that spiritual pride from which few devotees are exempt. After supper, a small harp was brought in, which had been sent for by the bishop's permission. It was terribly out of tune, with half the strings broke, but we were determined to grudge no trouble in putting it in order, and giving these poor recluses what they considered so great a gratification. We got it into some sort of condition at last, and when they heard it played, they were vehement in their expressions of delight. The Señora , who has a charming voice, afterwards sang to them, the bishop being very indulgent and permitting us to select whatever songs we chose, so that when rather a profane canticle, the Virgin of the Pillar, La Virgen del Pilar, was sung, he very kindly turned a deaf ear to it, and seemed busily engaged in conversation with an old madre, till it was all over. We were really sorry to leave them, particularly as it is next to impossible that we shall ever see them again, and it seemed as if in a few hours a friendship had been formed between us and these recluses, whose sensations are so few, they must be the more lasting. The thoughts of these poor women cost me a sad and sleepless night. They have sent me some wax figures dressed in the costumes of the different orders, beginning with their own. They wear the coarsest and hardest stuff next to their skin, in itself a perpetual penance. In these robes they are buried, and one would think that if any human being can ever leave this world without a feeling of regret, it must be a nun of the Santa Teresa. When, her privations in this world ended, she lays down her blameless life, and joins the pious sisterhood who have gone before her, dying where she has lived, surrounded by her companions, her last hours soothed by their prayers and tears, sure of their vigils for the repose of her soul, and above all sure that neither pleasure nor vanity will ever obliterate her remembrance from their hearts. At matins, at vespers, at the simple board, at the nightly hymn, she will be missed from their train. Her empty cell will recall her to their eyes, her dust will be profaned by no stranger's footstep, and though taken away, she still seems to remain amongst them. As for the monasteries, not only no woman can enter, but it is said, with what truth I know not, that a vice queen having insisted on the privilege of her viceroyalty to enter, the gallery had every place which her footsteps desecrated were unpaved. This was very Saint Sinanas like, and peu galant, to say the least. The finest convent of monks in Mexico is that of San Francisco, which, from alms alone, has an immense annual rent. According to Humboldt, it was to have been built upon the ruins of the temple of Huitzilopochtli, the god of war; but these ruins having been destined for the foundation of the cathedral, this immense convent was erected where it now stands, in 1531. The founder was an extraordinary man, a great benefactor of the Indians, and to whom they owed many useful mechanical arts, which he brought them from Europe. His name was Fray Pedro de Gante, his calling that of a lay friar, and his father was the Emperor Charles V. Of the interior of this convent I am enabled to give you a partial description, but whether from hearsay, in a vision, or by the use of my natural eyes, I shall not disclose. It is built in the form of a square, and has 5 churches attached to it. You enter a gate, pass through the great, silent, and grass-grown court of the broad staircase, and enter the long arched cloisters, lighted by one dim lamp, where everything seems to breathe a religious repose. The padre prior, seated alone in his cell, with a thick and richly clasped volume before him, a single lamp on his table, on the wall a crucifix, plain but decent furniture, with his bald head and pale impressive face, would have been a fine study for a painter. By such men the embers of learning and of science were nursed into a faint but steady flame, burning through the long gloomy night of the dark ages, unseen by profane eyes, like the vestal fire in pagan temples. A small room opening into his little parlor contains his bed, on which is a mattress, for the padres do not perform such acts of self denial and penitence as the cloistered nuns, and I am assured that his cigars are genuine Havana. Beggars lounging in the courtyard, a group of monks talking together within the walled enclosure. Change the scene to the monastery of San Agustin, and you might fancy yourself in the days of one of Walter Scott's romances, in the melange of soldiers and friars, for here his Excellency, the President, has his temporary abode, and the torchlight gleams brightly on the swarthy faces of the soldiers, some lying on the ground enveloped in their cloaks, others keeping guard before the convent gate. This convent is also very large, but not so immense as that of San Francisco. The padre prior is a good little old man, but has not the impressive, ascetic visage of the guardian of the other convent. His room is as simple, though not in such perfect order, and his bed is also furnished with a comfortable mattress. An air half military, half monkish, pervades the convent, aides de camp of the president passing along the galleries, their uniforms contrasting with the dark robe of a passing monk, returning, at nightfall, to his cell. The president had an alarm the night preceding, the prisoners in the jail having broken out. A serious affray had been expected, and everything was prepared for putting the person of the president in safety. The back stairs and secret passages in these old convents lead to excellent hiding places, and have been put to frequent use during the revolutions. In the old Monte Pio there is a communication with a convent of nuns, and in cases of pillage, the jewels used to be carried by a private staircase out of Monte Pio and placed under the care of the nuns of Santa Brigida. The convent of La Profesa is also a fine and spacious building, but excepting that it has a greater number of good paintings than the others, when you have seen one, you have seen all, and I believe none are as large as that founded by the illegitimate scion of the Imperial Charles, who himself ended his days in a similar retreat. End of letter the 27th.